Today's video is proudly sponsored by me and my webshop, thescalemodelingchannel.com. I have lots of 3D printed items, model paints, supplies, and other things to align for the scale model car builder, so feel free to check those out. I will be leaving a link in the description down below. The last couple of weeks I've been very busy finishing off all of my customer builds to get those out of the doors and finished off and out of my hair and into the hands of my customers. Some of them have taken way too long to finish off, so they deserve their builds, and I just kind of need to move on. And speaking of moving on and finishing things off, this is a build I started about 2 years ago during one of those vacations where you think, this is what I'm going to be doing in this week of vacation time, and then pretty much none of it, or at least a very small amount of that, gets finished. And this one was no exception. I fully stripped it, removed all of the paint, primed it, and painted it in a light gunmetal, which wasn't really to my liking, and then just set it aside. Now at this point of the video, I'm just going to skip the painting it in the color that I didn't like and just move on as if nothing happened with a fully stripped body and the primer being applied. For the paint application, I will be using a new airbrush that was sent over to me by NEOECO. If you're looking to get into airbrushing but are a little afraid to spend a ton of money for something you're not really going to be using or something that simply doesn't suit you, then this might be the best option to get started. These airbrushes are really inexpensive, and they have a ton of different versions, different needles, different handles, different ways of feeding the paint, and or just how to hold it in your hand. So do check those out on their website. I will be leaving a link in the description down below. Now for the airbrush that I'm using right here, this is the 116B. This is a trigger style airbrush, or a pistol grip trigger style airbrush with a top fed cup that just gravity feeds the paint in, and with the trigger you can just easily and ergonomically hold it in your hand very comfortably and go over all of the items that need to be painted. Now this one has a variety of different cup sizes, so if you just want to use a small amount of paint, you can switch out the cup and use a small cup, or if you're painting a bigger object, just switch it out to the bigger cup. Now not only does it come with a ton of cups, you can also put in different sizes of needles. It comes with a couple variations of that as well, and you can even just adjust the air pressure on the fly without having to touch your compressor, as there is a small valve underneath the cup which you can open or close to let more air flow through or less depending on your needs. And the same for the paint. On the back there is also a small knob that can be turned to restrict the depth of the needle that can go back and forth, so you don't spray on too much paint. So far I've used it for primer, which worked really well at the 0.3mm needle, which is just fine for the scale that I'm building right here, but you can also switch it out to the 0.8 for some bigger builds, kits, or objects to paint, but that is all up to your own desires, of course. Now for this one, the 0.3 is perfectly fine, sprays out a nice amount of paint and doesn't overdo it. And if it does, then you can simply just close it all up and be a little bit more conservative and not spray on as much paint if you're not really all that controlled to the airbrush or used to it at that point. So the primer and color have now been applied. I let that cure overnight and then masked off the front area to paint that nose section in a flat black, and that will then all be covered with a clear coat to get it nice and glossy along with the rest of the body. In order to give it that nice glossy finish, I will be using 2K Ultra Gloss from Splash and applying that in about 2 to 3 coats to get it nice, glossy, and smooth. A couple days later, the clear coat has fully cured, or at least cured enough for me to start masking it off and finishing off the build. I'm just going to need to paint a couple more sections in a flat black, like the trims around the doors and some other trims and bits and bobs. And that was done again with the same airbrush, same settings, and the 0.3mm needle. Now while that is set aside, I can focus on some other details, adding some black lines around some of the clear parts, and then just starting to assemble it back together. If you are interested in winning a free airbrush, either this one or the current giveaway that is running on the scalemodelingchannel.shop, head over to tsmc.shop and place your orders. The 25th order will win a free airbrush, the one that is currently being given away, or this one, or maybe even the next one. So be sure to head out to the scalemodelingchannel.shop and place your orders. With most of the exterior now completed, I could set that aside for a bit and focus on the interior. Overall, the interior is not too bad. It's just black and has some yellow highlights and nothing special apart from that. Now, the yellow highlights I'm not really that big of a fan of, and I'm also not a big fan of the seats that were used in this kit or this model car. So what I did is removed the top section of the seat, as the bottom is molded in with the rest of the interior tub, and then printed some new Recaros on an Elegoo resin 3D printer. Now, these files are available on Cult 3D. I will be leaving links in the description down below to the designer of these files. So with the top sections now removed and printed and painted, I could put my attention to some detail painting on the rest of the interior tub. I'm just going to leave most of it as is, but I'm going to be removing all of that yellow, so I'm painting over it with some black, adding some details here and there with some red, specifically for the 12 o'clock marker on the steering wheel, and also we'll be removing the stripe on the dashboard, and I'm just going to be covering that with some gunmetal. And as far as detailing goes, that's pretty much it for the interior. So the new top half of the seats could be glued in place, and then the final assembly could take place on the rest of this kit as well. I'm calling it a kit, but it is a die-cast model car that I've turned into a kit, but it's still not a kit, so bear with me there. The panel lines on these die-cast cars sometimes can be a little bit wide and deep, and therefore the paint just seeps in there nicely, but also is still highly visible. So I wanted to tone that down a little bit by using some Panelline accent color. I'm using the black one here, but in the end I mixed it with a bit of a light gray just to tone it down a small amount and added some more in there, not to make it as black as it was. Overall, not too bad. I'm really happy that I did it. It's not the perfect shade, but I'm just getting used to it and trying some things along the way. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick little build, and thank you to NEOECO for giving the airbrush. And of course, check out tsmc.shop to get your chance into winning one of these free airbrushes that I'm giving away currently.